All right, welcome to another Sunday live stream. Hello, Tony. Welcome. All right, so got something slightly different today. Um, I was watching a YouTube video this morning talking about the disadvantages of Linux, and some of these arguments that were being made were so tired that I swear I've heard them for every year that I've been running Linux. These Some of these are almost as tired as the whole year of the Linux meme that keeps coming every freaking year. So, good morning, David and Chris. So I ended up while I was watching this, I ended up doing a write up of some of my responses to the arguments being made in this particular video. I originally started them as a response, a comment on the video, but then I decided, I'm not going to show the original video, but I'll at least talk about the points being made in the original video. So that is what I've got on deck for today. So I'm going to switch over to my notes, and actually I'm going to bring that to the other screen so it's easier for me to look at the camera. Okay, so the first argument that this video hits the viewer with is that Linux is difficult to install. And I would actually make the argument that Linux in 2023, in most but not all cases, most cases, is actually easier to install than Windows is. It not only looks more fresh and cleaner in many cases for the as far as the installer goes, but it does a good job of hiding complex choices from the person installing while still making them available for a more advanced user. Certainly, Linux is easier to install in than any version of Windows before, say, Windows XP. So and even Windows 11, the fact that it makes you, and yes, I'm aware of the workarounds, it makes you jump through hoops in order to install without a Microsoft account is not a great thing in my view, and I know there are others out there that see it the same way. So this creator made his USB stick using different tools. Ventoy apparently was not one of them. And then he proceeded to more or less blame Linux for the issues with booting from USB. Now, I know with Ventoy you can make a USB stick, one stick that will work with both BIOS and UEFI, including systems that have secure boot turned on. Now, where the issue in this instance comes from is different manufacturers implement things in different ways. And sure, you're going to run into the occasional system that may not easily boot Linux distribution of choice in some instances. But at the same time, you could argue that I can't install my Windows 11 license on my 6-year-old computer without jumping through some hoops and having some issues and perhaps having to do some research to get it to all work on hardware that is just not supported by Windows 11. So this is the proverbial double-edged sword, so to speak. He also went so far as to make the laughable claim that to install Linux, you have to find the key to get to your boot menu on a particular PC. And, you know, this is one of those things where Windows comes pre-installed. Most people don't install Windows. Most, not all. I know a large number of people in this audience do, in fact, install Windows, whether for their own use or for a day job. But every hardware is different, and depending on manufacturer, you're going to have a different hotkey to get into your BIOS or to the boot menu. Again, not the fault of Linux. So that's just the first of the arguments made in this particular video. And so let's switch over to chat and see. Oops, go the other way and see who all is hanging out. And let's see. I hope you were nice with your language. I decided not to leave it as a comment. I started writing it in the comment section, and I thought better of it. And you know, I just decided that it would form the basis for this video instead. So yeah, that's how that went, I guess. Joe is in the house. Welcome, Joe. Jim the IT guy says, personally, I blame HP for silly BIOS keys. Yep. They're definitely a culprit in this case. And Ken is in the house as well. Welcome, Ken. All right. So if anybody has questions or comments along the way, please drop those in chat. And when I switch back from the topic to the chat, we'll try to address those questions as well. So let me take a look over here. Okay, so the next topic that or argument this guy brought up in his video was about hardware compatibility. But he specifically chose to use printers as his lead out topic. And so this is a rather tired issue or tired argument. I've seen this a lot over the years. Again, you know, having used Linux for 25 years, there's a lot that you see as a pattern happening over and over again, and you know, it just becomes a tired argument. So yes, there are printers that will not work with Linux. Fine. It was that way 20 years ago as well. And unless you're brand new to Linux and have to try to use the printer that you already own, chances are you've purchased a new printer in the last 5 years or 10 years anyways. Although once upon a time there were issues getting printers to work with Linux and adding them to Linux, I have demonstrated on more than one occasion how easy it is now to get my Brother laser printer to auto detect in most Linux distributions, which is even easier than what Windows presents you with, or has traditionally presented you with, where you have to select the manufacturer and then the model from a list. So again, this is one of those, I would call it an edge case where, yes, some printers may not work well with Linux or may require you to get drivers from another location not included with the distribution. But many of them now can be made to work with Linux. So I would turn this around and argue that there are many pieces of hardware, usually older, some that you might call legacy hardware, that you can no longer use with modern Mac OS or Windows PCs. There aren't any drivers. It's not supported. Or you have to go to third-party drivers, not the manufacturer drivers, to get those pieces of hardware to work. So again, we've got sort of that double-edged sword. But on top of all this, Linux has been around for over 30 years now. And I think credit is due for a lot of volunteer developers who have, done a splendid job of supporting hardware that was never intended by the manufacturer to actually function with Linux. So, again, it's one of those planned obsolescence things. If they made a piece of hardware that ran fine with Windows 98 or Windows XP, the chances of getting it to work in Windows 11 are not very good. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule, don't get me wrong, but you can still get zip drives and other crazy things from the 90s or early 2000s working on a modern Linux distribution. And while I haven't actually tested a zip drive with Windows 10 or 11, but there are other examples. Scanners are notorious for having their drivers dropped in newer versions of Windows and manufacturers abandoning them along the way. So, it's just one of those things. So let's jump over and see what people are saying in chat. Let's see. There are printers that will not work in any OS, and that's just printers. Yep. And garbage printers at that. These are mostly home hobbyist gripes. Yes, I absolutely agree with you, Chris. Printers don't work at all. Yeah. There's a reason that I moved to laser printers and network laser printers at that a long time ago. And making things easier on me as far as setting up printers was top on my list of reasons to do that. Agreed on the legacy statement 100. Yep. Thank you. I should talk about this. I got my Circle water bottle yesterday. These are the water bottles that have the flavor capsules that you can change out, and I'm pretty impressed with it so far. It's definitely making me drink more water. Now, if I could stick to this, I'll be in good shape. Um, so we'll see how this goes. But I think I drank two of these yesterday between 4 p.m. and the time I went to bed, and this is my second one today already. So we'll see how it goes down the road. But I I have decided that I would rather buy computer equipment and stuff than spend money on soda. So um, I'm willing to make a change. So, okay. The next argument, it, again, to me, is like beating a dead horse. The command line is inevitable. And I'm sure all of you have been around long enough and understand that regardless of whether you're using Linux, Mac OS, or Windows, if you are stepping beyond the office user type person, uh, the command line is where the power is. If you want to test networking on a Windows machine, you open a command prompt or PowerShell prompt or the Windows terminal, as they're calling it now, and you ping a host. If you want to test networking on Mac OS, and again, you're beyond that general office worker level, you open a command prompt and you ping the host. If you're using Linux, lather, rinse, repeat. Open terminal, ping the host. You know, the real power is in the command line. If you want to automate things, again, the power is in the command line. Whether you're using Bash on Linux or ZSH or ZSH, to humor my friends across the pond, on Mac OS, or you're using PowerShell on Windows, the power is in the command line. And this is just, it seems bizarre to me, but you know, again, 25 years of Linux use, and it's just, it's second nature to me. And a lot of people that I've worked with, tech people I've worked with, and you know, anybody sort of in that power user or more advanced category is at least vaguely familiar with the command line, even if it's just the ping command. You know, it's just one of those things. Okay, Tony says, not to get you off topic, but wondering if you made any progress yesterday on Anthias. No, I didn't. I ended up having to go out at the request of my father. He's been helping a 93-year-old man who has had some health issues. And I've helped this gentleman before, and he got out of the hospital. He couldn't figure out how to get to YouTube so he could watch his church service on Sunday. So I went back over there yesterday and spent some time with the two of them so that they both understood the process, and hopefully I wasn't going to be required to do that anymore. But so that kind of detracted from my time that I had originally set aside for Anthias, but hopefully I'll get this thing up and running and ready for a future video. That's part of the reason the TV is in here, is I wanted it as a background piece for the set, and maybe angle it to block the junk on top of the file cabinet. So, because unfortunately I've run out of shelf space to put books, so I've got books and other stuff on top of my file cabinet. So it's still on the to-do list. Um, Yesterday was kind of a cheat day, I have to admit, because the only video I put out was a short, and when it shot to number one on in analytics, I decided, you know what, it's number one. I'm taking the rest of the evening off. So it was a cheat day. So, but yeah, this guy, I think he's 93. He lost his wife about five-ish years ago. But he's had different problems on and off, and I think the way he was talking yesterday, he's actually going to go into an assisted living situation, because he was talking about the neuropathy that he's got in his left hand, and the shooting pains up to his elbow and things, and just not being able to be self-sufficient, which, I can only hope to live to be 93 years of age, let alone be have my mind fully working the way his is, and yeah. So that kind of detracted from my intended purpose for the afternoon. So okay, so the next thing in the list in this video: limited software availability. And that deserved the pause. So, if you're talking about commercial software, yes, absolutely, hands down agree. And when I look back on the last 25 years using Linux for different purposes, and probably about 8 to 10 years of that was as a full-time desktop user, there was even less commercial software available in the late 90s. And to illustrate how much things have changed in that period of time, we now have applications developed by Microsoft showing up on Linux. VS Code and Skype and Teams, I believe, has a version for Linux. And the other factor that is worth pointing out is that we now have the advantage of not one but 3 options for universal package formats that would allow software to run on all Linux distributions. And ideally, this should be seen as an invitation for commercial software companies to test the waters on Linux. And yeah, I know some of them did test the water in 1999 or 2000, when there was a huge hype machine behind Linux, including commercials being run by IBM on TV, one of which I believe had Muhammad Ali in it. But the fact in this situation is that they no longer have to choose one distribution to support over the others. So the too many distributions argument and too many package formats argument really flies out the window. Would I prefer a native application? Sure. However, realistically, they could, if they just wanted to test the water, they could release a version of a piece of software for Linux that is basically the Windows version packaged with a version of Wine that they have selected for compatibility, and put it in a Flatpak or Snap or an app image and release it. So you know, it's one of those arguments that really has its roots in traditional software development procedures. It has its roots in an old school mindset. But consider for a moment, in 2023, the huge amounts of software we have that can be run in a web browser. And so this argument of making Linux versions is really on thin ice. As we've seen during the pandemic times, we know that there's an entire generation coming up using Chromebooks in school. And just fast forward a few years to when these students get into the workforce or even start their own businesses. They're not necessarily going to be lining up to buy Microsoft and Adobe if there's a browser-based alternative that they already know and are familiar with. So, you know, I'm trying to abandon, to the extent that I can, this traditional mindset of, you know, how software is distributed, how software is developed, and why it's done the way it has been for so long. And really, as you know, the older generations start to phase out of the workforce and the younger generations come up into the workforce, things are going to continue to change in business. And while I do acknowledge that, you know, we're not going to get rid of COBOL anytime soon, not everybody needs to know COBOL. And, you know, there are some very powerful no-code tools available that are browser-based. And a good example of this is, yesterday I watched a video on a man was building an application, a ChatGPT application, using one of these no-code tools in 20 minutes. And it was pretty amazing to me. So, yeah, that's that. So, TVJ is in the house. Welcome, Jay. I've got something special for you today. Let's see. Jim the IT guy. Don't worry, next year will be the year of the Linux desktop. Ha 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 ha. Yep. It's always next year. All right. Okay, so we're going to switch gears here for just a minute. About a minute, maybe a minute 10. And so I've got a video clip to show, if I can locate it. And we'll let this roll. It does not have audio, so I'll be back after it's over. Not sure if you can still hear me, but this is the inside of the Supermicro Server dual node monster I've got sitting next to me. I did not pull out the trays that the individual nodes are mounted to, but in the top right corner there you can see the back part of the network card that is in that node, and there's actually an identical one in the other node. So there's 4 memory sockets per CPU, and only 1 socket for each CPU is currently populated. So at some point I will be adding more memory to this, but right now that is what I've got in there. All right. Excuse me. All right, so couple more points that were made in the video I watched this morning. There are too many distributions. Okay, that's a fair point, but choice is a good thing. Do we need 600 Linux distributions? Probably not, but most of them are created either as a learning project for an up-and-coming developer, or because none of the other distributions that the person tried fit their needs. And to add to that, too many desktops. Okay, again, do we need, 25 plus different Linux desktops? Probably not. I've been hearing this argument most of the 25 years I've been using Linux. Again, this is a home user, hobbyist type of argument. And once you get into a business setting, if you actually have a desktop on a Linux box, it's likely to be one of a handful, usually KDE or GNOME. There are places that let you run other things, but in a business, standardization is good, and so if they give you a choice at all, it's usually KDE or GNOME. But at the heart of this argument, would you ever argue that there are too many companies producing cars, or there are too many different dashboard layouts in those cars? This is the tired old argument that goes back to Henry Ford, when he argued that you could have a car in any color you wanted as long as it was black. And when it comes down to brass tacks, the argument I bring back to people that say there are too many desktops, that there are too many distributions, is basically that if you understand the basic concepts of a graphical interface, mouse, Windows, icons, mouse, and pointer, WIMP, you should be able to move from desktop to desktop in Linux, or from Mac OS to Windows to Linux to BSD without any great hassle. The larger issue is going to be keeping the same workflow across platforms because of differing software availability. And that has been an issue since the dawn of the home computer era in the late 70s. You couldn't just take your software and go from one computer to the other easily. And it's got a lot easier than what it was in, the 70s. I wasn't even using computers in the 70s, so I'm not going to speak on this with any great authority, but I've done a lot of research and watched a lot of videos on what was available, with CPM, and then the home computers with the Apple II and the TRS-80 Model 1 and the Commodore PET, that all shot onto the scene in the late 70s. And unless you were writing the most basic of basic programs, the chances of going from one machine to the other was going to take a lot of extra work. And things have improved, but this problem is not completely solved. So it's just kind of ridiculous. The final argument he made in this section was that if you're a Linux user, you have to keep trying new desktop environments. And I think this is another argument that falls flat. While it might be advantageous for individual users to try different desktops just to keep informed of what's available, the argument is rather ridiculous that you have to. There are people that have used GNOME since the pre 1.0 version of GNOME and still use it today. Would you ever be so bold as to tell someone that since there are an increasing number of car companies out there, especially electric car companies, that you should keep trying different car companies or car brands every time you buy a car? That would be ludicrous. So it's just kind of crazy. And maybe the target audience for this particular video was more for those home users and not a serious person, but at least that should have been denoted in the description of the video. And it's just kind of bizarre, some of the points that are being made. Jay, I'm not sure the CPU coolers are different sizes. They're just turned 90 degrees. I'm pretty sure they're the same size, but I would have to double check that. Get a tape measure out and double check that. Thanks for the video. I can't stay, but we'll watch the replay. All right. Thanks for stopping in. Deskmate is still the best. Oh my gosh. I ran Deskmate on 64K Color Computer 2. I don't know, probably about 1989. And it was it was kind of painful, but it did have an integrated spreadsheet, word processor, and database, if you could call it that, on an 8-bit computer with 64K of RAM. But it definitely piqued my interest. And the interesting part of OS 9, or part of Deskmate on the color computer at least, was that it ran OS 9 underneath, which was a multitasking, multi-user, Unix-like operating system for 8-bit computers, if you can imagine that. So Anyway, let's see. Are you going to leave a link to this live stream in the comments of that video so the creators aware of your counterpoints? It seems to definitely struck a nerve with you. Yeah, I thought about it. I thought about it. I think I've still got it open in a tab in my browser, so I could probably do that. Or, then my viewers could go over and see what his complete arguments were and, see if they agree or not with my counterpoints. So, good suggestion, Tony. Okay. So these the next two are kind of I don't know. Program installation is the next one. And I can concede to some extent the point that there are many ways that you can install software on Linux distributions. You've got deb packages and RPM packages, and there are a few others out there. And then you've got the universal packages, Snap, Flatpak, and App Image. So yes, there are multiple ways to install software, and then you could go and compile software too. Something that no Windows user has ever been really asked to do, not an end user anyways. So at the same time, you've got on Windows, you've got MSI and EXE packages. And software on macOS is distributed in either DMG images or PKG files. And the long and the short of it is that regardless of which platform you're on, Apple's pushing the Apple App Store. Microsoft is pushing the Microsoft Store. On Linux, you've got graphical wrappers around the package managers, often presented in to the end user as a store type paradigm, because that's what everybody else is using and that's what they know from cell phones and tablets. So while I can concede to some degree on this point, it's not like there's a single universal package format for Windows or Mac OS either. Okay. That gets followed with pre-installed apps. And I can't even go into this one with a straight face. All distros come with some included software, and sure, you may or may not agree with the choices made by the maintainers of those Linux distributions. And they might include software that you do not need. But how is this different from Windows or Mac OS? Windows has become a place where they dump games and other things from the Windows Store onto your computer by default. And even if you uninstall them, they come back after the next update. And of course, on Mac OS, it's not as ridiculous. It hasn't turned completely into an advertising platform the way Windows has to some extent. But you still get, the iMovie and the iWork suite included by default. And several of those applications I will never use. Does it mean that I want to complain to Apple and say, don't include those. No. It's their platform. They can include what they want. Honestly, if you don't like it, then don't use it. It comes down to that. So, all right. Do you have to approve them? Maybe I have mine locked down on that. So on a fresh install, unless I use like the tiny Windows 11 install, which is not official, I still get a lot of that garbage included by default, and it does seem to keep coming back after updates. So there are probably some ways around it. Maybe we'll have to converse offline about that, and maybe I'm missing something simple. So let's see. Gaming. Again, a home user hobbyist argument. Sure, there are fewer games for Linux than on other platforms. Fine. This is getting better every day thanks to the efforts of Valve with Steam, and the Steam Deck being a Linux-based game console. Perhaps there aren't as many AAA games available, but there is enough variety to keep most people happy, unless you're a competitive gamer. And again, I want to illustrate there are a lot of people that play games in browsers these days. Again, not competitive gamers, but there are browser-based games and more games coming out that run in browsers all the time. And something else that's going to be interesting going forward is WebAssembly, or WASM, as it's often abbreviated. So one of the things I discovered in the last month or so is over on what is it? The Internet Archive. They actually have browser-based emulators for classic arcade games via WebAssembly. So the idea behind WebAssembly, and I'm not a programmer, so forgive me if I get something wrong on this, but the idea behind WebAssembly is instead of compiling your code to an executable file on Windows, you compile it to a WebAssembly module that can then be run in the browser. Now, again, I'm not a programmer. I don't understand the intricate details of this. But again, for a long time, the browser has been pushed as the democratizing avenue for making software available to more people in more places. And this just takes it to the next step, because you can compile more complex software and have it run in the browser. So, I don't know. Gaming has not really been a deciding factor for me choosing what computer to buy. I've always gravitated more towards the IT end of things rather than the gamer end of things when it comes to computers. I've done, a lot of gaming over the years in the last 40 years, and most of it's been console gaming. Now, it is much easier to play games on Linux or really anywhere else these days because of Steam and good old games and some of the other game launchers that are available. And I'm interested to see in the next 5 to 10 years whether more of these games are going to be able to take advantage of WebAssembly and run from the browser still in full screen. So, it'll be interesting to see. But again, unless you're a competitive gamer, there are probably enough games available that it could keep you busy for a long time. Okay, Jim the IT guy says the issue is more that on any Windows install you can install MSI or EXE. Yet, for example, installing RPM on Ubuntu means jumping through hoops. Can be done, but it requires doing extra work. Sure, I can concede that. However, with Flatpak and Snap and AppImage, you can run those on any Linux distribution. And it's just one of those things. It's going to be easier going forward, and it just remains to be seen how things are going to continue to change over time. The number of changes I've seen since I've been doing IT work is just, it's phenomenal to think about how far we've come. So software is becoming platform agnostic in the future, or is the future, but it's never going to be right for every solution. Sure, I will concede that point as well. No argument from me whatsoever. Just like Windows is not the best tool for every job, and Mac OS is not the best tool for every job, and Linux is not the best tool for every job. You sometimes have to choose the tool to fit the job, and that's really my underlying point with all this is, it's not a one size fit all world, and that applies whether you're buying a car or whether you're buying a computer, or whether you're buying clothing for that matter. So there are things that I can easily concede and say yes, there's a point there, or there are places where there's a point in a certain context, and that's something that a lot of people have less of a grasp on than they probably should, is context. But all you have to do is watch the news and you know that people have an issue with context. And that's why everybody spins things to fit their needs, right? So the final point made in the video was one of troubleshooting. And sure, the error messages and log messages tend to be a little more cryptic in Linux if you are coming from another platform. I can give you that much. Regardless of what OS you're using, you either need to have some strong Google foo, or you will likely end up paying somebody else to fix your computers. Now, obviously, the people in my audience are going to have better troubleshooting skills than the average Joe. No offense, Joe. You're an above average Joe. We'll call you an above average Joe. A big part of troubleshooting is reading the information presented to you and using the scientific method, or the troubleshooting methodology that has been proposed and put out there by CompTIA and other industry organizations. And there are parallels between the scientific method and the troubleshooting methodology. Identify the problem, establish a theory of probable cause, test the theory to determine the cause. And you might be repeating steps 1 through 3 more than once. Establish a plan of action to resolve the problem and implement a solution. Verify full functionality, and if applicable, implement preventive measures. And then, the step that a lot of people overlook is step number 6, document your findings, actions, and outcomes. So, try telling graphic designers that macOS isn't the best tool, then duck as they throw Wacom tablets at you. Yeah. So Mac OS with a capital M has long since been discontinued. But yes, I get your point. I'm just being pedantic at this point. Yeah. The artistic types, you're going to be hard pressed to pry their Macs away from them. And you're going to be hard pressed to pull Linux away from me for doing networking and other troubleshooting that I need to do on a regular basis. Just because some of the tools aren't as easily available on Windows as they are in Linux. Now, that being said, in the last, we'll say less than 5 years, Microsoft has got on the bandwagon and started building in Winget, which is a package manager for Windows. And so the great thing about this is that out of the box, or in a fresh install of Windows 11, or if you're fully updated on Windows 10, you can install software, and quite a bit of it, from the command line in Windows. And it's one of those things that if that had been available 20 years ago when I was really getting heavy into using Linux, I may never have gone down this road. It's just one of those things that, and I'm not going to cut Apple any slack on this. Apple should really be including Homebrew by default in Mac OS. It's sad that they don't have that available and have it as a way to install software. Because under the hood, under the pretty exterior, there's a full Unix system underneath Mac OS, and that's that. Oh, 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Hey, it's a full JAU, and guess what? We've got Joe's comment on screen. My epitaph. Above average Joe. Well, what do you want on your tombstone? Bacon and mushrooms, or ham and pie? No, pepperoni, right? And above average Joe on yours, right? All right, so. Yeah, maybe not the most technical live stream, but I don't know. It just popped in my head as a topic this morning after I saw that video pop up in my feed, and I thought, you know, what the heck. I thought it was something different, and I actually had more or less a script written out, so fewer ums and ahs today that I noticed. So that's a good thing, right? I want my tombstone to read, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny. Those bastards." Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. I did want to jump over to the Proxmox machine for a moment. And so I left my ThinkPad downstairs, so I was going to throw a quick VM up. Just maybe we won't go through the whole installer, but we will. I want to check on a couple things here. So I downloaded the latest installer, the ISO for what's going to be Ubuntu 23.04, and I just want to see if they have added the OEM install option back in, which is something I want to use for some upcoming videos. Excuse me. And I just want to know how soon I can make those videos. So let's set this up real quick. And see what happens. And we should get... Okay. So I would expect as we get closer to the release of 2304 that they're going to add back the OEM install option. My suspicion is that the reason it is not there now is because of their new installer. Which, you know, is... It's about time that they updated their installer. It was looking rather dated, I'll admit. So, you know, it's just one of those things. However, you know, when you consider that a Windows or Mac OS install has been largely the same for at least the last decade, it kind of makes you wonder how much wasted time is going into creating, you know, half a dozen different installers for Linux. I would almost rather see them, again, this is a personal perception of effort being put into things. I would rather see the effort be put into a single installer that is available to all distributions than, you know, the 6 different installers that may only be used by 1 or 2 distributions. Is it a big deal? No, they all have basically the same options, as does the Windows installer and the Mac OS installer for that matter. It's just that most people never see the Windows or Mac OS installer. We are all in the elite minority, right? So, one thing that I was pleased to find out yesterday when I installed 2304 on my ThinkPad is that it not only installed very nicely, but after the install, it prompted me for firmware updates for my ThinkPad. So that was a happy surprise. The great thing was that that old T460 ThinkPad had a 2022 UEFI update. So I was kind of impressed with that. So let's see. Tony says, enjoy the stream. Great counters to each point, done in a positive light. Thank you. Do you think Proxmox will ever make adding, removing, replacing cluster nodes less of a hassle? That's a great question. I suspect that we won't see any big changes until at least version 8 of Proxmox, which I expect out towards the third or fourth quarter of this year, because that next version should be based on Debian 12 or built on top of Debian 12. So that I don't expect to change at least until version 8. And we'll see how high on the priority list that is for them to develop. I'm trying to replace a hard drive in one of my nodes, and it's a royal pain. Yeah, I haven't had to do that, but currently I don't have my Proxmox machine set up in a cluster. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is to take the machine out of the cluster, do the upgrade or replacement for the hard drive, and then add it back in. And I'm still not sure how easy that would be, given some of the documentation I've read and the problems I've seen posted in forums online. One thing, I would like a wireless keyboard, since I'll probably have some interesting emails to send. What are you doing with that i9? I am slowly planning out what hardware I'm going to buy to go with the i9 that was so graciously gifted to me. And I'm hoping by the end of the summer I will be building the i9 system. This one I'm probably going to do a little different. So we'll see. So anyway, this is the new installer. It's got a facelift. I think they had made pretty public that they wanted to refactor the code underneath, and in doing so, they also gave it a facelift and made it look more modern, which fine, okay. If you're going to do an overhaul, then sure, update the look and feel of it. So I know there's at least one other distribution working on an updated installer too. I'm not sure which one it is off the top of my head. So anyway, so things are looking up, I guess. I have a couple of good ideas for videos for pretty much the rest of the week, which will take me to Friday, which is the end of the month-long challenge of daily content. And if I didn't disqualify myself by only doing a short yesterday, then I will have made the full month doing daily content. Mixture of recorded, live, and the one odd short. So going forward, I won't be continuing to do daily content. I know that much. That's pushed my boundaries as far as I wanted to push them. And my goal is 2 to 3 recorded videos per week plus the Sunday live stream. And I will likely be doing one of those videos during the week as a second live stream. So it's likely going to be 2 live streams a week and 2 recorded videos a week. And my thought process is doing it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and just continuing that pattern. And there will obviously be Sundays that I won't do a live stream. For instance, Easter, I likely will not do a live stream. So just I come to the realization I can publish more content than I have been doing prior to March. March pushed me to a limit a little too far. And so if I find a happy middle point, I think everything will work out and the growth will continue to happen to a degree that I'm content with. So, but yeah, that's the default desktop on 2304. One of the new wallpapers. One of the first things I like to do is get rid of the personal folder on the desktop, because I just think in 2023 it's makes no sense to have it there, in my opinion. Especially when you can just come over here and open the file manager and you're in the home folder anyways. Remind me later. So, yeah. I guess that's that. Are there any final questions or comments from the people in chat? Let's see. Let's see. I think I've hit everything. So just for the sake of argument, I want to try something new here. And So one of the things that StreamYard just added. Oh, I can't do that because I'm going through the ATEM. Whoops. Yeah. So StreamYard just added the ability to do custom layouts. But since I'm using the ATEM for my switching, it doesn't work so easily. So if I leave the camera going through the ATEM and add, oops, not that, share my screen this way, they now have some different layouts that you can use, or custom layouts that you can add to, and makes it kind of interesting. Once I start doing some streams with other people, I think this will be even more interesting than it is for something like this. So that's that. I had to play with it a little bit while we were live. Missed it. We'll have to watch it later. Well, thanks for dropping in, Terrell. Appreciate it. And a good stream. Thank you, David. All right, so I think I'm going to wrap things up. Hopefully, I presented my counterpoints to this particular video in a positive way. I disagreed with a lot of them, but I did in fact concede a few. Once the live stream's over, I will go back and grab the link for that video and I'll put it in the description. So yeah, this was fun. It was something a little different for me, and hopefully I can again find that balance point between doing, strictly tech videos and taking myself off screen, and somewhere in the middle between that and me just talking the whole time, because that does get tiring. So if you did get something out of this, please take a moment to like, subscribe. If you were in chat, you're already subscribed, so thank you, all of my chat people. And I will see you in the next video. Enjoy the sun and the warmth today. It's going to be, I think, 50 degrees here in Michigan, so hopefully everybody else is seeing a similar warm up. Have a great day, everybody.